In the vast expanse of the Andromeda Spiral, where ancient dragon dynasties ruled star systems with fire and fury, there existed an unbreakable law. Only the most magnificent hatchlings could ascend to power. Beauty meant strength, grace meant wisdom, and perfection meant the right to live among the stars. But what happens when a universe's most feared predators encounter something they've never seen before? A small human child who sees beauty where others see failure. What happens when innocence meets ancient pride? When a 7-year-old's giggle can shatter millennia of tradition? The galaxy is about to learn that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't plasma breath or titanium claws. Sometimes it's simply the pure heart of a human child who doesn't know she's supposed to be afraid. This is the story of how one unwanted hatchling and one lost little girl changed the fate of 2 species forever. This is the story of how humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to love the unloved and find beauty in the broken. Welcome to a tale where the smallest hearts carry the greatest courage, and where the bond between species proves stronger than the ancient laws of dragons. The crimson suns of Draconis Prime cast long shadows across the crystal nesting chambers, where the most powerful beings in the galaxy waited for their offspring to emerge. Elder Pyraxis, his scales gleaming like molten gold, watched with ancient eyes as the final egg in the royal clutch began to crack. This was the moment that would determine the future of the Drachmer Empire, a civilization that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. The first 3 hatchlings had emerged perfectly. Zorinth broke free with claws that could cut through starship hulls, his scales a brilliant emerald that caught starlight like precious gems. Valera followed, her silver hide reflecting the chamber's glow as she breathed her first flame, a perfect cone of blue fire that melted the crystal floor beneath her feet. Then came Korthax, massive even as a hatchling, his black scales seeming to absorb light itself, his roar shaking the very foundations of the nesting spire. Each had been magnificent. Each had been worthy of the Drachmer name. The 4th egg shuddered. A small crack appeared along its surface, spreading slowly like a spider's web across the deep purple shell. The crack widened, and something pushed through, something that made every dragon in the chamber step back in horror. The hatchling that emerged was wrong in every way their species measured worth. Whereas siblings had gleaming, uniform scales, this one's hide was a patchwork of mismatched colors, dull brown mixed with splotches of muddy green, interrupted by streaks of faded yellow that looked almost sickly in the chamber's light. One wing was noticeably smaller than the other, and when he tried to spread them, the left one drooped at an odd angle. His eyes, instead of the fierce golden gaze of their kind, were a soft, almost human-like brown that seemed to hold more curiosity than predatory instinct. When he opened his mouth to produce his first flame, the sacred fire that marked a dragon's birth into power, nothing emerged but a small puff of smoke that made him cough and stumble. The silence in the nesting chamber was deafening. Elder Pyraxis closed his ancient eyes, feeling the weight of 10 millennia pressing down upon him. In all the recorded history of their species, there had never been such a failure. Their laws were clear, written in the blood of countless conquered worlds. Only the perfect could lead, only the strong could survive, only the beautiful could claim their birthright among the stars. The deciding has begun, Pyraxis announced, his voice echoing through the crystal chambers like distant thunder. Around him, dozens of adult dragons lowered their great heads in solemn acknowledgement. This was the ancient ritual, performed when a hatchling proved unworthy of the Drachmer name. The ugly hatchling looked up at them with those strange, gentle eyes, seemingly unaware that his fate was being sealed. He took a hesitant step toward his siblings, but Zorinth hissed and swatted him away with one perfect claw, leaving a shallow scratch across the failure's already imperfect hide. "You are not one of us," Valera declared, her young voice already carrying the imperious tone of royalty. "Look at yourself. You bring shame to our bloodline." The hatchling's strange eyes filled with something no dragon had seen before in their species: tears. He made a small, whimpering sound that somehow conveyed more pain than any roar of fury ever could. Korthax, the largest of the siblings, reared up on his hind legs and brought his forepaws down hard beside the ugly hatchling, making the smaller dragon flinch. Father is right. You cannot stay. You are not Drachmer. You are not even dragon. Elder Pyraxis spread his massive wings, each one large enough to cast a fighter ship in shadow. It is decided. The failed one will be taken to the edge worlds beyond our territory. Let it find its fate among the lesser species, where ugliness is perhaps more tolerated. The other adults nodded their agreement. It was mercy, they told themselves. In the old days, such a hatchling would have been destroyed immediately. Instead, he would be abandoned on some distant world, left to survive or perish as fate decreed. It was the kindest fate they could offer to one so fundamentally flawed. As the guards moved to escort the hatchling away, he looked back once at his siblings, his expression holding a desperate hope that perhaps one of them might defend him, might claim him as family. But Zorinth, Valera, and Korthax had already turned their backs, eager to begin their training as future lords of the galaxy. The ugly hatchling was loaded onto a transport ship piloted by Captain Thrix, a scarred old dragon who had performed this grim duty many times before, though never for one quite so pathetic. As the ship lifted away from Draconis Prime, the hatchling pressed his misshapen face against the viewport, watching his home world grow smaller and smaller until it was just another star in the endless black. Captain Thrix consulted his star charts with professional disinterest. The Edge Worlds were a collection of primitive planets on the very border of dragon territory, most of them inhabited by species too weak to be worth conquering. There was Kepler 442b, with its ammonia storms and silicon-based life forms. Gliese 667cc, where the methane-breathing Zephyrite built their crystalline cities beneath toxic clouds. And then there was Earth, a small blue world inhabited by a species called humans, who had only recently developed faster-than-light travel and were considered so technologically primitive that the Drachmer Empire barely acknowledged their existence. Earth it is, Thrix muttered, setting the coordinates. The humans were soft-bodied, short-lived creatures who posed no threat to anyone. If the failure survived among them, at least he wouldn't endanger any important species. The journey to Earth took 17 standard cycles. During that time, the hatchling sat quietly in the ship's cargo hold, neither eating the food provided nor attempting to speak. Thrix found the creature's silence unnerving. Young dragons were typically loud, aggressive, and demanding. This one just stared out of the small porthole with those unsettling brown eyes, as if memorizing every star they passed. When they finally reached Earth's solar system, Thrix began scanning for a suitable drop site. The planet was mostly water, but there were several large land masses dotted with what appeared to be human settlements. He needed somewhere remote, where the hatchling wouldn't immediately encounter the natives and potentially cause an incident that might draw unwanted attention from the Drachmer military. His sensors identified a suitable location, a forested region on the continent the humans called North America, far from any major population centers, but close enough to a small human settlement that the hatchling might find shelter if it chose to seek it out. "This is where you get off," Thrix announced, not unkindly. In truth, he felt a flicker of sympathy for the creature. He had once been considered imperfect himself. His scales bore too many battle scars to be considered beautiful, but at least he had been functional enough to serve as a soldier. The ugly hatchling looked up at him with those expressive eyes and nodded once, a surprisingly human gesture that made Thrix's ancient heart skip a beat. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its cloaking field hiding it from the primitive human detection systems. Thrix sat down in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees, their leaves just beginning to change color in what the local star charts indicated was the human season called autumn. As the cargo door opened, the hatchling stepped out onto alien soil for the first time in his short life. The air was thinner than on Draconis Prime, and filled with strange scents, growing things, decay, and something else he couldn't identify. Water, perhaps, but cleaner than any water he had known. "Good luck, little one," Captain Thrix said quietly, and for a moment his scarred features softened almost imperceptibly. Perhaps among these humans, being different won't matter so much. The transport lifted off, leaving the ugly hatchling alone in the earth forest as night began to fall. For the first time since his birth, he was completely on his own, abandoned by his own kind, and stranded on an alien world with no idea how to survive. He took a tentative step forward, his mismatched claws crunching on fallen leaves. In the distance, he could hear strange sounds, not the familiar roars and hisses of dragon speech, but something softer, more musical. Sometimes he caught glimpses of light through the trees, warm and yellow unlike the harsh blue illumination of dragon cities. As he began his first night on Earth, the ugly hatchling had no way of knowing that his life was about to change in ways that would shake the foundations of two civilizations. He could not foresee that his greatest strength lay not in his flaws, but in the unique perspective those flaws would give him. Most importantly, he had no idea that somewhere in those distant lights, a 7-year-old human girl named Emma was about to become the first being in the universe to look at him and see not failure, but wonder. The great transformation was beginning, though none could see it yet. In the morning, the ugly hatchling would take his first steps toward discovering what it truly meant to be valued not for perfection, but for the courage to be different in a universe that demanded conformity. The stars wheeled overhead, and in their ancient light, a new chapter in the history of dragons and humans alike began to unfold. Emma-chan adjusted her purple backpack straps and stepped carefully over a fallen log, her small sneakers squelching slightly in the damp earth. The 7-year-old had been exploring these woods behind her grandmother's house since she arrived 3 days ago, and each day brought new discoveries. Today, she was searching for the source of a strange sound she had heard during the night. Not animal sound exactly, but something sadder, lonelier. Her grandmother had warned her not to wander too far from the house, but Emma was naturally curious, and the forest seemed to call to her with its autumn colors and mysterious shadows. Besides, she was careful to mark her path with small piles of colorful stones she collected, creating a trail she could follow back home. The morning sun filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. Emma paused to examine an interesting mushroom growing from the base of an old oak tree, carefully sketching it in her nature journal with colored pencils. She was working on the mushroom-spotted cap when she heard it, a soft whimpering sound, like a puppy in distress. Following the sound, Emma pushed through a thicket of berry bushes and emerged into a small clearing she had never seen before. What she found there made her gasp, not in fear, but in wonder. Curled up beneath a pile of fallen leaves was the most unusual creature she had ever seen. At first glance, it might have been a very large lizard, but its proportions were all wrong for any reptile she knew. It was roughly the size of a large dog, but with wings folded against its sides and a long, elegant neck. Its hide was a fascinating patchwork of colors, browns and greens and yellows that reminded Emma of her grandmother's old quilt, each patch telling its own story. The creature's eyes were what captured her attention most. They were large and brown and filled with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. When those eyes met hers, Emma saw something she recognized immediately: loneliness. It was the same expression she had worn during her first day in new school, when she sat alone at lunch and wondered if anyone would ever want to be her friend. The dragon hatchling, though Emma had no word for what he was, raised his head weakly. He had been 3 days without food, and the alien environment was taking its toll. He expected the small human to scream and run, as he had learned all beings did when they saw him. Instead, the little creature with the dark hair and bright eyes tilted her head to one side and said, "Oh, you poor thing. Are you hurt?" Her voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. Not the commanding roar of dragon speech, but gentle and musical, filled with genuine concern. When Emma took a step closer, he flinched instinctively, but she moved slowly, the way she approached injured birds in her grandmother's garden. "It's okay," Emma whispered, crouching down a few feet away. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Emma. What's your name?" The hatchling stared at her in confusion. No one had ever asked his name before. In dragon society, names were earned through great deeds and demonstrations of power. He had never been worthy of a name, had simply been referred to as the failure or the ugly one when anyone bothered to acknowledge him at all. Emma waited patiently for an answer, but when none came, she continued talking in that soft, reassuring voice. "You look hungry and cold. Are you lost?" "I get lost sometimes too, but I always find my way home eventually." She slowly reached in her backpack and pulled out half of the peanut butter sandwich her grandmother had packed for her morning exploration. Breaking off a small piece, she placed it on the ground between them and scooted back to give the creature space. "I know it's people food," she said apologetically, "but it's really good. Grandma makes the best peanut butter sandwiches in the whole world." "Well, that's what Daddy says anyway." The hatchling cautiously stretched his neck forward and sniffed the offered food. It smelled strange, but not unpleasant, nutty and sweet, with undertones he couldn't identify. His stomach cramped with hunger, and after a moment's hesitation, he carefully took the piece of sandwich in his teeth and swallowed it. Emma clapped her hands together softly, her face lighting up with joy. "You liked it? Here, have some more." She tore off larger pieces and placed them closer to the creature, gradually building his trust. As he ate, she kept up a steady stream of gentle chatter, telling him about her grandmother's house, about the rocks she collected, about her cat Whiskers back home who liked to sleep in sunny windows. The hatchling found himself relaxing for the first time since his hatching. This small human's voice washed over him like a soothing balm, and her presence brought something he had never experienced before: peace. When she laughed at her own story about how Whiskers once got stuck in a paper bag, the sound was so pure and joyful that it made his chest feel warm in a way that had nothing to do with dragonfire. "You know what?" Emma said suddenly, as if struck by a brilliant idea. "You're beautiful." The hatchling's head snapped up in shock. Beautiful? Him? The word was so foreign when applied to himself that he wondered if he had misunderstood her strange language. "I mean it," Emma continued, studying him with the serious expression she wore when considering important matters. "Your colors are like a rainbow, and your eyes are the kindest eyes I've ever seen. And your wings," she pointed to his mismatched appendages, "they're like artwork. Each one is special and different, just like you are." The hatchling felt something wet on his face and realized he was crying again, but for the first time in his short life, the tears were not from pain or rejection. Emma saw beauty in his flaws, value in his differences. She looked at him and saw not failure, but wonder. "Oh, don't cry," Emma said, misinterpreting his tears. She scooted closer, close enough to gently touch his snout with one small hand. "I didn't mean to make you sad. I just wanted you to know that you're special." Her touch was incredibly gentle, and the hatchling closed his eyes, memorizing the sensation. In dragon culture, physical contact was about dominance and submission, pain, and pleasure. This was different. This was comfort, freely given with no expectation of anything in return. Emma spent the rest of the morning with her new friend, sharing her sandwich and telling him stories. She showed him her collection of interesting rocks, explaining why each one was special. This one sparkled in the sunlight, that one was perfectly round, another had a natural hole through the middle that she could look through like a tiny telescope. "See," she said, holding up a piece of quartz that caught the light. "It's not fancy like diamonds or rubies, but it's still beautiful because it's unique, just like you." The hatchling began to understand that Emma saw the world differently than any being he had ever encountered. Where dragons valued uniformity and perfection, she celebrated differences. Where his kind saw weakness in variation, she found strength in individuality. As the sun climbed higher, Emma checked the small watch her grandmother had given her, a grown-up responsibility she took very seriously. "Oh no, I have to go back soon or Grandma will worry. But I'll come back tomorrow, okay? I promise." She gathered her things and started to leave, then turned back with another one of her brilliant smiles. "You need a name. All special friends need names." She considered for a moment, studying his unique coloring and gentle expression. "I'm going to call you Patch, because you're made up of all these wonderful different pieces that come together to make something amazing." Patch. The hatchling, no, Patch, tested the name in his mind. It was the first time anyone had given him an identity that wasn't based on his failures. Emma had looked at his patchwork hide and seen not imperfection, but art. She had taken his greatest shame and turned it into his greatest distinction. Emma waved goodbye and disappeared into the trees, following her trail of colored stones back to her grandmother's house. As she walked, she thought about her new friend and made plans for tomorrow. She would bring more food, maybe some of Grandma's cookies if she could sneak them, and maybe a blanket to keep Patch warm. He had looked so thin and cold curled up under those leaves. Behind her, Patch watched until the last glimpse of her purple backpack vanished among the trees. Then, he carefully gathered the fallen leaves back around himself, but this time not to hide from the world, but to preserve the warmth that Emma's kindness had kindled in his heart. For the first time since his exile from Draconis Prime, Patch felt something he had never dared hope for. Tomorrow would bring something wonderful. Emma had promised to return, and in his brief experience of her character, he already knew that Emma kept her promises. As night fell over the Earth Forest, a young dragon learned what it meant to have a friend, and a small human girl dreamed of rainbow-colored wings and kind brown eyes. Neither of them knew that their friendship would soon become the catalyst for events that would change the relationship between their species forever. The galaxy's most powerful empire had cast out what they saw as imperfection, never imagining that what they called failure might be the key to a strength they had never learned to value. The power of unconditional acceptance, freely given by a pure heart. Emma kept her promise. She returned the next morning, carrying a thermos of warm soup her grandmother had made, along with a soft blue blanket she had borrowed from the guest room. When she arrived at the clearing, she found Patch exactly where she had left him, but he looked different somehow, more alert, more hopeful. "Good morning, Patch," she called out cheerfully, and the dragon's heart soared at the sound of his name spoken with such warmth. No one had ever greeted him before. In dragon society, acknowledgement was something you earned through strength and beauty, not something freely given. Emma spread the blanket on the ground and patted it invitingly. "Come on, this will be more comfortable than those scratchy leaves." Patch hesitated for a moment, then slowly approached the offered blanket. When he settled onto the soft fabric, Emma could see the relief in his expression. The material was unlike anything he had experienced. Warm, gentle, and carrying the faint scent of human homes that was quickly becoming associated with safety in his mind. "Grandma made this soup special," Emma announced, unscrewing the thermos cap. "It's chicken noodle, and it's perfect for when you're not feeling well." She poured some into the cap, which served as a makeshift bowl, and offered it to Patch. The warm liquid was revelation. Not only was it nourishing, but it carried flavors that seemed to warm him from the inside out. More than that, it had been prepared with care by Emma's grandmother, making it a gift twice over, from Emma who brought it, and from the human elder who had made it. As Patch sipped the soup, Emma settled cross-legged beside him on the blanket and pulled out a book from her backpack. "I thought you might like to hear a story," she said. "This one is about a dragon, but he's probably different from whatever kind you are." Patch's eyes widened. Emma thought he was a dragon? He had assumed she simply didn't know what he was, that perhaps humans had no word for his kind. Emma opened the book to reveal colorful illustrations of a small green dragon who lived in a village and helped people. As she began to read, Patch found himself fascinated not just by the story, but by the act of storytelling itself. In dragon culture, information was transmitted through formal teachings and ancient protocols. The idea of sharing stories for pleasure, for the simple joy of narrative, was completely foreign to him. The dragon in Emma's book was nothing like the mighty Drakmar warriors. This dragon was kind and gentle, helping lost travelers and rescuing cats from trees. The villagers loved him not for his power, but for his compassion. See, Emma said, showing him a picture of the book dragon surrounded by smiling humans. Dragons can be gentle and good, just like you. Patch made a sound, not quite a growl, but a deep rumble in his throat that seemed to convey both sadness and confusion. Emma looked up at him with concern. "What's wrong, Patch? Did I say something that made you sad?" For the first time, Patch tried to communicate beyond simple acceptance of Emma's offerings. He pointed with one claw at the illustration, then at himself, and shook his head slowly. The message was clear. He was not like the dragon in the book. Emma studied his expression carefully. She was young, but she had always been intuitive about emotions. "You don't think you're good like the dragon in the story?" she asked gently. Patch nodded, his brown eyes filled with the weight of a lifetime's rejection. Emma closed the book and turned to face him fully. "Well, I think you're wrong. Want to know how I can tell you're good?" Patch tilted his head curiously. "When I first found you, you were hurt and hungry and scared, right? But you didn't try to hurt me, even though I'm much smaller than you. And when I offered you food, you were careful not to bite my fingers. And when I pet you, you were so gentle, like you were afraid you might accidentally hurt me." Emma counted these observations on her fingers as she spoke. Bad dragons wouldn't be careful like that. Bad dragons would only think about themselves. This perspective had never occurred to Patch. In his world, restraint in the face of weakness was seen as just that, weakness. But Emma saw his gentleness as evidence of goodness, his careful nature as proof of a kind heart. Besides, Emma continued, "My daddy always says that being good isn't about being perfect. It's about trying your best and caring about others. And I can tell you care, Patch. I can see it in your eyes." That afternoon, Emma introduced a new element to their friendship, play. She had brought a softball from her grandmother's house, and she tried to interest Patch in a game of catch. At first, he didn't understand the concept. Dragons didn't play. They trained, they competed, they demonstrated dominance. The idea of activity purely for enjoyment was alien to him. But Emma was patient. She rolled the ball gently toward him and encouraged him to roll it back. When he awkwardly pushed it with his snout, she clapped and praised his effort enthusiastically. Gradually, Patch began to understand that this wasn't about winning or losing, achieving or failing. It was simply about sharing pleasant time together. Soon, he was carefully batting the ball back to Emma with his claws, being mindful of his strength so he wouldn't hurt her or send the ball too far. Emma's laughter each time he successfully returned the ball filled him with a joy he had never known existed. "You're getting so good at this," Emma declared after a particularly well-aimed return. "Want to try something else?" She taught him to play hide and seek, though his colorful hide made him easy to spot among the autumn foliage. When he tried to hide behind a tree that was far too small to conceal him, Emma pretended to search for him with great difficulty, calling out, "Oh no, where could Patch be? I see a tail, and I see wings, but no Patch anywhere." When she finally found him, Patch made another sound, a huffing noise that Emma realized was laughter. It was the first time he had ever laughed, and the experience was so overwhelming that he felt tears spring to his eyes again. Emma noticed immediately. "Happy tears?" she asked, and when Patch nodded, she grinned. "Those are the best kind." As the days passed, Emma established a routine. She would visit Patch each morning, bringing food, stories, and games. In return, Patch began to share things about himself. He couldn't speak her language, but he was intelligent enough to find ways to communicate. When Emma told stories, he would act out his reactions, covering his eyes with his wings during scary parts, clapping his claws together during exciting moments, making sad faces when characters faced hardship. Emma quickly learned to read his expressions and body language, developing their own unique form of communication. Patch showed Emma things too. He demonstrated how he could make tiny puffs of smoke, not the mighty flame his siblings could produce, but enough to warm Emma's hands on chilly mornings. She was delighted by this ability, clapping and asking him to do it again and again. That's amazing, Patch. You're like a little campfire. To Patch, who had been mocked for his weak flame, Emma's admiration was transformative. She didn't compare his small smoke puffs to the mighty fires his siblings could create. To her, his ability was perfect exactly as it was. Emma also discovered that Patch had an incredible memory for details. When she showed him her rock collection, he examined each stone carefully and could later point to the exact spot where she had found each one. When she told him stories, he would remember every character and plot detail, sometimes acting out scenes from previous days' tales. "You're really smart, Patch," Emma said one morning after he correctly identified which story she was beginning based on just the first sentence. "Smarter than anyone I know." In Dragon Society, intelligence was measured by one's ability to master complex battle strategies and manipulation techniques. But Emma valued Patch's intelligence for its own sake. His curiosity about the world, his careful attention to her stories, his thoughtful responses to new experiences. One week after their first meeting, Emma made a discovery that would change their friendship forever. She was teaching Patch a clapping game when she noticed him trying to mimic the sound she was making. At first, she thought he was just copying the rhythm, but then she realized he was attempting to form words. "Ma," he said carefully, copying one of her sounds. Emma's eyes went wide. "Patch, are you trying to talk?" "Ma," he managed, his voice rough and uncertain but unmistakably attempting her name. Emma squealed with excitement and hugged him, the first real embrace she had given him. Patch froze in surprise, then carefully wrapped his wings around her small form, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his chest. "You said my name? Oh, Patch, you're learning to talk. This is the best thing ever." For Patch, the ability to speak Emma's name marked a turning point. He wasn't just receiving her friendship anymore. He was participating in it. He was becoming someone worthy of the love she had shown him from the very beginning. As Emma packed up her things that afternoon, preparing to return to her grandmother's house, Patch managed to produce one more word: friend. Emma spun around, her face glowing with joy. Yes, we are friends. Best friends." That evening, as Emma told her grandmother about her wonderful day exploring the woods, carefully omitting the details about Patch, she couldn't contain her happiness. She had found something precious in those woods, not just a unique creature, but a true friend who appreciated her just as much as she appreciated him. Meanwhile, back in the forest clearing, Patch practiced forming human words, preparing for tomorrow's visit. For the first time in his life, he had something to look forward to, someone who valued him for exactly who he was. Emma had shown him that worth didn't have to be earned through perfection. Sometimes it was simply given, like sunshine or rain, freely and without condition. Neither Emma nor Patch knew that their growing friendship was being watched from the stars above, where Dragon Patrol ships occasionally passed through Earth's solar system. They had no idea that their bond would soon attract the attention of powers far greater and more dangerous than either of them could imagine. For now, they were simply a girl and her dragon, learning that the strongest bonds are forged not in conquest or domination, but in the quiet moments of understanding between two hearts that recognize each other as kindred spirits. 3 weeks into their friendship, Emma arrived at the clearing to find Patch practicing something new. He had arranged a collection of fallen leaves into careful patterns on the ground, using his claws with delicate precision to create intricate designs. When he saw her approaching, his eyes lit up with excitement. "Emma," he called out, his pronunciation much clearer now. "Look, made pictures." Emma gasped as she examined his work. The leaves formed beautiful spiraling patterns, some depicting abstract shapes, while others clearly represented things from their time together. A rough but recognizable human figure, a ball, even a rendering of Emma's backpack. Patch, these are incredible. Emma knelt beside the leaf arrangements, careful not to disturb them. You're an artist. I never knew dragons could make art. Dragons, not make art, Patch said slowly, still struggling with complex sentences. Dragons make war, make fear. Patch different. This was the first time Patch had spoken about his origins, and Emma sensed there was pain behind his words. She had noticed that he seemed to know things about the world that suggested he came from somewhere far more advanced than Earth's forests. But she had never pressed him about his past. Tell me about dragons, Patch, she said gently, settling on their shared blanket. Where do you come from? Patch's expression grew somber. In halting words mixed with gestures, he began to tell Emma about the Drakmar Empire, about his siblings who had been born perfect while he had emerged flawed. He described the crystal nesting chambers of Draconis Prime, the judgment of the elders, and his exile to Earth. Emma listened with growing indignation. The more Patch described his treatment by his own kind, the angrier she became on his behalf. That's horrible, she declared when he finished. How could they be so mean to you? You're the nicest, most wonderful dragon in the whole universe. Emma see good in Patch, he said, his voice filled with wonder even after weeks of her friendship. Dragon family, see only ugly, see only wrong. Well, they're stupid, Emma said with the fierce loyalty of a 7-year-old defending her best friend. And they don't deserve to have you if they can't see how special you are. Patch felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. Emma's unwavering support gave him strength he had never known he possessed. For the first time since his exile, he began to feel pride in who he was rather than shame for who he wasn't. Show me more about your world, Emma said, her curiosity overriding her anger. Can you draw it? Using sticks in the dirt, Patch began sketching images of his home world. The towering spires of dragon cities, the massive ships that carried his people between stars, the formal courts where elders made decisions that affected entire galaxies. Emma watched in fascination as an entire alien civilization took shape in the forest floor. Your people travel to other planets? She asked, her eyes wide with excitement. Like in Star Trek. Patch didn't understand the reference, but he nodded. Dragons rule many worlds. Very powerful, very old. But they made a big mistake, Emma said firmly. They let you go, and you're the best dragon of all. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by a sound that made Patch's blood freeze, the distant hum of dragon engines approaching through the atmosphere. His head snapped up, and he quickly erased his drawings with sweeping motions of his tail. Emma, he said urgently, his improved language skills deserting him in his panic. Must hide, must run. Danger come. Emma had never seen Patch frightened before, and his terror was immediately infectious. What's wrong? What's coming? Dragons, Patch said, scanning the sky desperately. Find Patch. Maybe hurt Emma. High above Earth's atmosphere, Commander Vex of the Drakmar patrol vessel Stormclaw was reviewing routine sensor data when something caught his attention. There had been unusual energy readings from this sector, faint traces of dragon biochemistry in a region where no dragon should exist. Investigate the third planet, he ordered his pilot. There may be unauthorized dragon presence in this system. The patrol ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its sensors automatically tracking the source of the dragon energy signatures. They led directly to a small forested region on one of the planet's major landmasses. In the clearing, Patch was trying desperately to convince Emma to leave. Go home, he pleaded. Emma's safe with grandmother. Dragons find Patch, take away. Maybe hurt Emma too. But Emma, with the stubborn loyalty that defined her character, refused to abandon her friend. I'm not leaving you alone, Patch. We'll hide together. No place hide, Patch said miserably. Dragon ships see everything. Find anything. Emma thought quickly, then grabbed Patch's claw. The cave? There's a cave by the river where I found those pretty crystals. It's deep and dark. Maybe they won't find us there. Together, they crashed through the underbrush toward the limestone cave Emma had discovered during one of her earlier explorations. It was a narrow opening that led to a larger chamber underground, formed by centuries of water erosion. Emma had been fascinated by the crystal formations inside, but now it might serve as their hiding place. They reached the cave just as the Drachmer ship became visible through the forest canopy, a sleek, predatory craft that moved with silent menace among the trees. Patch and Emma squeezed through the cave opening and pressed themselves against the far wall, where shadows would hide them from casual observation. "Patch," Emma whispered in the darkness. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that you're my best friend in the whole world. Meeting you is the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me." Patch felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of gratitude mixed with fear. Emma's friendship had taught him that he had value, that he deserved love and loyalty. Now he faced the possibility of losing not just that friendship, but of bringing harm to the first being who had ever shown him kindness. "Emma best friend too," he whispered back. Patch love Emma, like family. Outside, Commander Vex and two of his soldiers had landed and were examining the clearing where Patch and Emma had spent so many happy hours. The Dragon Commander was a massive specimen of Drachmer perfection, scales like polished obsidian, wings that could blot out the sun, and eyes that glowed with the cold fire of absolute authority. "The readings are strongest here," one of his subordinates reported. "Definitely dragon presence, but strange. The biochemical signatures are mixed with alien compounds." Vex examined the area with professional thoroughness. He found traces of Patch's presence, claw marks in the earth, scales caught on branches, the faint scent of dragon tears. But there were other signs too, small footprints, strange objects, evidence of extended habitation. "Sir," the second soldier called from near a tree. "You should see this." Vex approached and found himself staring at something that made no sense in his ordered understanding of the universe. Tied to a low branch was a small ribbon, purple fabric with tiny silver stars embroidered on it. It was clearly of alien manufacture, delicate and decorative in a way that no dragon artifact would ever be. More disturbing still were the arrangements on the ground nearby. Someone had created art from natural materials, spiraling patterns of leaves, arrangements of colorful stones, stick figures drawn in the dirt. These weren't random natural formations. They showed clear evidence of intelligence and creativity. But dragons didn't make art for pleasure. Dragons didn't create beauty for its own sake. And dragons certainly didn't interact peacefully with alien species. "Commander," the first soldier said hesitantly, "the chemical analysis suggests prolonged contact between dragon physiology and an unknown alien species. The readings indicate positive interaction patterns." Vex's eyes narrowed. This was unprecedented. In 10,000 years of Drachmer expansion, no dragon had ever been known to form peaceful relationships with lesser species. Such behavior violated the fundamental principles of their civilization. In the cave, Emma held her breath as she heard voices speaking in a language that sounded like controlled thunder mixed with the hiss of steam. Patch pressed closer to her, his body trembling with the effort to remain silent. One sound from him would give away their location and put Emma in terrible danger. The voices grew closer. Emma could see shadows moving past the cave entrance as the dragon soldiers searched the immediate area. One of them paused directly in front of the opening, and Emma was certain they had been discovered. But after a long moment that felt like hours, the shadow moved on. The alien voices continued their discussion, but the sound began to fade as the search moved to other areas of the forest. Eventually, the rumble of dragon engines filled the air again as the patrol ship lifted off. Emma and Patch waited in the cave for what felt like an eternity before daring to speak. "Are they gone?" Emma whispered. Patch listened carefully to the sounds of the forest gradually returning to normal. Birds resuming their songs, small animals moving through the underbrush. "Think yes. Gone for now." They emerged from the cave to find their peaceful clearing had been thoroughly searched. The blanket Emma brought was still there, but everything else had been examined and left slightly disturbed. Most heartbreaking of all, Patch's beautiful leaf art had been scattered by careless dragon claws. "Oh, Patch," Emma said, seeing his devastated expression. "I'm so sorry about your pictures." "Make new pictures," Patch said with forced cheerfulness, but Emma could see the pain in his eyes. Important thing, Emma's safe. But both of them knew that their innocent friendship had attracted dangerous attention. Emma helped Patch gather the scattered leaves, and together they tried to recreate some of his artwork, but the joy had gone out of the activity. The shadow of discovery hung over them now, a reminder that their worlds were not meant to touch. "Will they come back?" Emma asked as they worked. Patch considered this carefully. "Dragons curious, find strange things, want answers. Yes, we'll come back. Look more." Emma's face set in determined lines. "Then, we'll have to be more careful. I won't let them take you away, Patch. I promise." As they prepared to part that day, both friends carried the weight of new knowledge. Their friendship had been discovered by forces beyond their understanding, and those forces would not simply ignore what they had found. The galaxy's most powerful empire was now aware that one of their exiled failures had formed an impossible bond with an alien child. The next phase of their story was beginning, and it would test the strength of their friendship in ways neither of them could imagine. But Emma's promise echoed in Patch's heart as he watched her disappear into the trees. She would not let them take him away. For the first time since his exile, Patch dared to hope that perhaps the love of one small human girl might be stronger than the ancient laws of dragons. In the stars above, Commander Vex was filing a report that would soon reach the highest levels of Drakmar command. A dragon had been found living peacefully with an alien species, creating art, forming emotional bonds. Such behavior was not just unprecedented. It was potentially dangerous to the very foundations of their empire. The stage was being set for a confrontation between two very different understandings of what it meant to be alive in the universe. And at the center of it all were a rejected dragon hatchling and a 7-year-old girl who believed that love could conquer anything. Elder Pyraxis received Commander Vex's report while presiding over the Grand Assembly on Draconis Prime. The ancient dragon's golden scales dulled visibly as he read the impossible words. Artistic expression, interspecies bonding, emotional attachment. Everything that violated the fundamental principles upon which their civilization was built. "Impossible," declared Elder Cythera, her crimson hide gleaming with indignation. No true dragon would debase itself with such behaviors. And yet, Pyraxis said slowly, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia, "The evidence is undeniable. The biochemical readings confirm extended peaceful contact. The artifacts suggest creativity for its own sake." He paused, the words seeming to stick in his throat. "The failed hatchling has somehow survived and adapted to alien influences. Zorinth, Valera, and Korthax, now grown into magnificent young dragons, listen from their honored positions in the assembly. Their brother's exile had been all but forgotten until this moment, but now his unexpected survival brought shame crashing back upon the royal bloodline. "Father," Zorinth spoke, his emerald scales catching the crystal chamber's light, "surely this confirms that our decision was correct. The creature was so fundamentally flawed that exile to a primitive world has corrupted it beyond recognition. It is no longer dragon." Valera nodded her elegant silver head. "The contamination must be cleansed before it can spread. Imagine if other dragons were exposed to these influences. The degradation could threaten our entire species." Korthax, massive and imposing, rumbled his agreement. "Send a cleansing fleet. Destroy the planet and everything on it. Eliminate the source of corruption." But Elder Pyraxis raised one ancient claw for silence. Despite his revulsion at the report's contents, something about the situation troubled him. In 10,000 years of Drakmar expansion, they had never encountered a species capable of fundamentally altering dragon behavior. The implications went far beyond simple contamination. "A full investigation is required," he declared. "I will lead a diplomatic vessel to this Earth myself. We must understand what manner of creatures could accomplish such changes before deciding how to proceed." On Earth, Emma and Patch had spent 5 anxious days trying to maintain their friendship while staying hidden from dragon patrols. They had moved their meetings to different locations each day, sometimes deep in the forest, sometimes by the river where Emma had first found the cave, once even in her grandmother's old barn when no other option seemed safe. But the strain was showing on both of them. Patch had grown thin from the constant stress and irregular meals, and Emma had dark circles under her eyes from lying awake at night worrying about her friend. "This isn't fair," Emma said on the 6th morning, as they huddled in a grove of pine trees that offered some concealment. "You shouldn't have to hide just because you're different from other dragons. Being different is wonderful." Patch had been teaching himself to read using Emma's picture books, and his language skills had improved dramatically. "Drakmar Empire no understand different," he said carefully. "To dragons, different mean dangerous. Dangerous thing must be eliminated." "Well, that's stupid," Emma declared with 7-year-old clarity. "Different is what makes everything interesting. If everyone was the same, the world would be boring." Their conversation was interrupted by a sound that had become all too familiar, the approach of dragon vessels. But this time, instead of the small patrol ship they had been avoiding, the sky darkened with the shadow of something massive. Elder Paraxis's diplomatic ship was a kilometer-long monument to Drakmar engineering, its hull adorned with the accumulated treasures of 1,000 conquered worlds. As it descended through Earth's atmosphere, every dragon aboard could feel the profound wrongness of what they were about to encounter. "There," Patch said, pointing to the great ship with a trembling claw. That elder ship. Very important dragons. They come for Patch." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "Then we'll talk to them. We'll make them understand." "No, Emma," Patch said desperately. "Elder dragons no listen. No understand." Think Patch broken beyond fixing. Think Emma enemy who break dragon. But Emma had already made up her mind with the decisive certainty that only children possess when facing the impossible. "Then I'll show them they're wrong. I'll show them what you really are." Before Patch could stop her, Emma was walking out of their hiding place, heading directly toward the clearing where the great ship was preparing to land. Patch had no choice but to follow, his heart breaking at the thought that Emma's kindness was about to be met with the cold cruelty he knew his people were capable of. The diplomatic ship touched down in the forest clearing with surprising delicacy, its advanced systems ensuring minimal damage to the surrounding trees. A ramp descended, and Elder Paraxis emerged, flanked by a full honor guard of the Empire's finest warriors. The ancient dragon's presence was overwhelming, scales that had been polished by 10 millennia of reverence, wings that cast shadows like storm clouds, eyes that held the accumulated wisdom and terrible power of ages. Behind him came other elders, each one a living legend of conquest and dominance. And there, in a clearing decorated with leaf art and colorful stones, they found the impossible. Their rejected hatchling sitting peacefully beside a tiny alien creature who showed no fear of beings that could level mountains with their breath. "Greetings, Elder Pyraxis," Patch said, rising to his feet but keeping his voice respectfully low. His pronunciation of the formal dragon language was flawless despite weeks of speaking mostly human words. The ancient dragon studied his rejected offspring with expressions ranging from disgust to fascination. Patch was indeed changed, still imperfect in form, but there was something in his bearing that hadn't been there at hatching. Confidence, perhaps. Purpose. "You live," Pyraxis observed, his voice like distant thunder. "I live," Patch confirmed. "And I have learned much about life since leaving Draconis Prime." "You have been contaminated," Elder Sithra interjected, her crimson scales bristling with revulsion. "Look at this place, this degrading artistic expression, this proximity to an inferior alien species. You have forgotten what it means to be dragon." Emma, who had been listening to the exchange without understanding the formal dragon language, suddenly stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said politely, looking up at beings that towered over her like moving mountains. "Are you Patch's family?" The dragons stared down at her in amazement. The small creature showed no instinctive terror, no submission to their obvious power. Instead, she radiated the same gentle strength they had detected in their contaminated offspring. "I am Emma," she continued, when no one answered. "Patch is my best friend. He's told me about you, but I think there's been a big misunderstanding." Elder Pyraxis found himself oddly compelled to respond to the small being's calm confidence. "You are the alien that has corrupted our spawn," he said, his words automatically translated by his suit systems. "Corrupted?" Emma's eyebrows shot up in indignation. "I haven't corrupted anyone. Patch was already wonderful when I found him. I just helped him see it for himself." "Impossible," Elder Sithra declared. "The creature was defective, worthless. It could not have been wonderful, as you claim." Emma's expression grew fierce with protective loyalty. "Patch is the kindest, most creative, most caring person I've ever met. He makes beautiful art, he tells amazing stories, and he has the biggest heart in the universe. If you can't see that, then you're the ones who are broken, not him." A shocked silence fell over the assembled dragons. No being, dragon or otherwise, had ever dared to call an elder broken. The audacity was so unprecedented that several of the honor guard actually stepped back in amazement. But Patch, seeing the dangerous glitter in the elder's eyes, quickly moved to place himself between Emma and the ancient dragons. "Please," he said desperately. "Emma no understand dragon ways. She mean no disrespect. She only defend friend. Stand aside. Failure," Korthax commanded, stepping from behind the elders. Patch's brother had grown into an intimidating specimen of dragon perfection, his black scales seeming to absorb light. "Your contamination ends now." But Emma wasn't finished. With the fearless conviction of innocence, she looked up at Korthax and said, "You're his brother, aren't you? You look a little bit like him, but not as nice." "Not as nice." Korthax was so stunned by the comparison that he actually laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "I am perfection incarnate, small creature. He is a failure that should have been destroyed at hatching." "You're mean," Emma said simply. "Patch would never say something so horrible about you, even though you were awful to him. That's the difference between being perfect and being good." Elder Pyraxis felt something stir in his ancient heart, an emotion he hadn't experienced in centuries. This small human child was defending their reject with a loyalty that put dragon family bonds to shame. Moreover, she spoke of concepts that dragon society had long forgotten. Goodness for its own sake, love without condition, the value of kindness over power. "Show us," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the rising tension. "Show us what you claim to see in this failure." Emma's face lit up with joy at the opportunity. "Patch, show them your art. Show them how you make beautiful things." Patch hesitated, terrified of further humiliation, but Emma's encouraging smile gave him courage. Slowly, carefully, he began to arrange fallen leaves into one of his spiral patterns, his claws moving with delicate precision to create something beautiful purely for the joy of creation. The assembled dragons watched in stunned silence as their rejected offspring created art, not for conquest, not for dominance, but simply because beauty had value in itself. When Patch finished, Emma clapped her hands together in delight. "Isn't it wonderful? He makes these every day, each one different and special." Elder Pyraxis stared at the leaf spiral for a long time before speaking. "In 10,000 years of empire, no dragon has ever created art for beauty alone." "Then maybe your empire has been missing something important," Emma said gently. The ancient dragon's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that would have terrified seasoned warriors. "And what is that, small creature?" Emma thought for a moment, then said with the profound simplicity that only children can achieve, "Joy. You've been missing joy." Patch showed me that being strong isn't about making others feel small. Real strength is helping others feel big. And real beauty isn't about being perfect, it's about being true to who you are inside. She walked over to Patch and took his claw in her small hand. Patch is true to who he is. He's gentle when he could be fierce, kind when he could be cruel, creative when he could be destructive. That's not corruption. That's evolution. That's what your people could become if they chose love instead of fear. Elder Pyraxis felt the foundations of his worldview shifting beneath him. Everything this small human said contradicted the principles that had governed dragon society since the dawn of their civilization. Yet he could not deny the evidence before his eyes. Their failed offspring had indeed become something new, something that transcended their traditional understanding of strength and worth. "You would have us abandon 10 millennia of tradition?" he asked. "I would have you choose happiness," Emma replied. Patch is happy now. Happier than he ever was when he was trying to be what you wanted him to be instead of who he really is. Isn't that worth more than tradition? The great dragon stared down at the small human child who had somehow found the words to express what he had been feeling but could not name. In her innocent wisdom, she had identified the emptiness at the heart of Drakmar's civilization, the absence of joy, the lack of love freely given. Slowly, Elder Pyraxis lowered his great head until he was eye level with Emma. "You have given us much to consider, small human. Perhaps there is wisdom in your words." He turned to Patch, seeing his rejected offspring clearly for perhaps the first time. "You have found something we lost long ago, young one. The question now is whether we have the courage to find it again ourselves." As the sun set over the Earth forest, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in a circle around Emma and Patch's leaf art, listening to a 7-year-old girl read stories about friendship and kindness. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ancient hearts of dragons began to remember what it felt like to love without condition, to value beauty for its own sake, and to find strength in gentleness. The transformation of two civilizations had begun, sparked by the unshakable bond between a rejected dragon hatchling and a little girl who saw wonder where others saw failure. In the years to come, the Drakmar Empire would evolve into something unprecedented, a civilization that valued compassion alongside strength, that celebrated differences rather than demanding conformity. But that is a story for another day. For now, it was enough that under the Earth's gentle sky, dragons and humans had learned their first lesson in understanding, that the greatest power in the universe is not the ability to destroy, but the courage to love unconditionally. And at the center of it all, Patch finally understood what Emma had seen in him from the very beginning. Not failure, but possibility. Not ugliness, but unique beauty. Not corruption, but the seed of something wonderful that could change the galaxy itself. As the stars came out overhead, two species began to dream of a future built not on conquest, but on friendship. And in the forest clearing where it all began, a patchwork dragon and a little girl with a big heart proved that sometimes the most important revolutions start with the simple recognition that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are.